So I have a lot of tropes that aren't as popular. Some people love the arranged marriage, some people don't. Some people love the pregnancy, some people don't. Some people really love, love triangles. Again, some don't. The memory loss, either you don't or you do. I've stacked a lot of things, but because it is so fresh and different, I do think it could work. I'm open to changing that if it's really people are not going to like it. If something really is not working, I don't mind reworking it.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Let's Fix Stories. This is season 2, episode 1, and today we have a very special guest. We have Bria Rose, is that? And so we have her today, and it's good to see everybody, your other folks. And so today we're gonna kick things off with our usual. It's been a while. It's been a while
Yes.
since we've done this. So I'm trying to remember what the itinerary was. So the first thing we do is we let you tell us a little bit about your story, a little bit about yourself, and give us your elevator pitch ish for your story. Um and we why you told it, who the target audience was, and all that jazz.
Okay, so this introduction's a little different because, hi, I am Bria Rose. I actually am a published author. I do currently write dark romance fairy tale retellings. The one I currently have out is a Beauty and the Beast Why Choose retelling. So I have kind of like solidified myself as a type of right now author I want to be in this niche of fairy tale retellings. But this story that I have presented to you guys is actually my very first story that I ever wrote. And so it's an OG. So the audience was different because I was actually co-writing it with somebody else. So I wanted to go more on the darker side, smuttier side, spice. And she was like, I don't want to get too dark. So we had these conflicting ideas and it was a whole thing, but we started it in high school. We recently had a little falling out and I got to adopt the book. Uh I made out in my opinion because this story is just so precious to me and I'm so excited to get it out into the world even though again it's gonna change. It's gonna change a lot, but I do love the story. But the elevator pitch, we have she is in this kind of like magical world that there's different kingdoms. There's the werewolf kingdom, the witches, the fae, different types. Again, I wrote this a while ago and this was before I published, so I'm trying to really also remember. But so we have her and a very different like dynamic. She's kind of like the golden child. She's a younger child of 2 and she finds out like her sister got in a way. She's going to be forced into this arranged marriage. She has a mate who is her like bodyguard. So she's like, "No, I have my mate. Like I'm happy. I thought we were kosher. I thought we were good to go." Turns out the guy is an alpha from the werewolf kingdom. He's not really nice. He's not a good guy at all. So she's like, "You know what? Hey mate, let's like run away. I'm over it. I'm done. Let's get out of here." So he's like, "Okay, I'll meet you on the other side of the garden. I'll meet you at this time." So she runs away, but she's stopped by this ruggedly handsome dark-haired man. I know. And turns out he was sent to her. I don't know what I can say, what I can't say.
Be like,
Well, he was sent to do some murdering, okay, by her sister. Shocker. And so they fight, and she's a really good fighter. She is a princess, but she was trained. She has a lot of excess energy. So they're like, okay, I guess we're gonna, get some of that out. So she can fight. So they fight, up getting like a blast of light, ends up getting sent to the human realm where she hits her head on a rock, loses her memory. Now she wakes up in a hospital room. I know you said elevator pitch. I'm just going through it. Like I said, it's been a while. I'm like, oh gosh, I haven't practiced this. Basically, she is now in this world with this man who says that she's a princess. She doesn't remember any of it, but he knows he can't kill her now. He needs her because he has an idea of who she is. But now it's like their journey through the rest of the book to try and get back to it. I do have a pregnancy trope in there. She does end up pregnant by her mate. It was so funny because the ex-friend, I thought she wanted that trope in the book. And so I put it in the book because I'm like, people don't really like the pregnancy trope. It has to be different, has to be whatever. So I'm like, okay, I guess I'll add it. And she's like, yeah, I don't really like it. I don't know why you added it. I'm like, I added it because you wanted it. And she's like, no, I thought you wanted it. So that's why I have it in there. And now I kind of like it though, because it it does veer off different, and I just feel like it makes her stronger as a character. But again, it's a very different book. I would like to take it into a different direction, and of course, we all find out. I mean, he ends up being her actual mate. There's a lot of twists and things like that. I like twisty stories, but I want this to be a big universe. I want this to be like Sarah J. Maas Throne of Glass, where we go through it, we see different characters, we're growing and improving and things like that. Kinda like maybe not high fantasy, but yeah, there's a lot of world building and things like that.
Okay.
Having a whole world to fall into.
Yeah,
It's a fun universe to explore.
I think
one.
all I ever build is universes. So I get that. I get that. Okay. So the first thing we typically do is we break it down by what's working, what needs work. I added something to this particular story because I broke my rule because normally I don't it's like sometimes people will send in outlines or they'll send in like little things to give us context about what we've read, and I usually do not. You're the first guest, I think, where I read their outline because
Okay.
I wanted the context because this genre, I'll be completely honest, this genre or this not this genre, this specific sliver of the genre is one that I normally hate. So
That's
I was
okay.
so I was like, let me but then when I was reading it, I was like, I really like this. This is good. There's some stuff that really is that I didn't expect to be there, and I liked that. So I was like, okay, let me read the outline so I could see what the idea is for the rest of the story. So I added a section to this today, and that's going to be the developmental thoughts. And you guys are more than welcome to share your thoughts if you have any as well. If you're like me, which you both are in many ways, your creative brains probably went somewhere about like, oh well, what would I do to add to it? And you asked or you posed some interesting thoughts in the outline as well about like perspective or thoughts on it. So I was like, I wanted to bring a full amount. But the first thing we do is the what's working part, and then we do what needs fixing.
May I interject with our usual disclaimer?
Yes, yeah, I was gonna do it this time. I actually remember this time, but no, it's totally fine. You do the
I
disclaimer.
I will take it over for the disclaimer this time. We do things a little bit differently, having a whole panel of us because editing is a very subjective thing. Like Jared said, sometimes you have someone who really loves the genre, sometimes you have someone who doesn't, and it's good to combine all those different perspectives. And with the usually like one of us will read the outline and then one of us won't, and then we'll have the perspective of like, you have the grand scheme of the whole story, and then you have the perspective of someone who may have only picked up the book off of a shelf and flipped through it and decided whether they wanted to keep reading. So given all of that, editing in general is supposed to be a conversation. It's not just professionals who think their opinion is God and put it on you. It's helping the writer to tell the story that they want to tell, that they feel in their soul they need to tell. So jump in with any of your thoughts, any more context you can give us throughout this. Feel free to interrupt because this is a conversation. It's not just us giving you advice. It's us brainstorming together how to tell the story that you want to tell. So there's our disclaimer.
Awesome.
Okay, so we start with what's working. Avengers Assemble. No, it's so starting with what's working, I usually go last. So I'm gonna let
Charles. Oh no. I was gonna say Charles. You haven't said anything yet. So you're getting thrown.
True, you have been sort of buried by all this. Charles, let us know what you thought was working.
So it was interesting that when the outline said this is, let me bring it up. I have it here. I read this book in 3 months without having knowledge of how to structure a book, write a book, or develop characters, nothing. I thought it was very interesting because I said, okay, so this is going to be a little bit messy on the structure. But actually, I thought the structure was very, very solid. It moved at a very good pacing, good momentum, good rhythm of the technical presentation of it, and I could follow what was going on, and it felt much more. I don't think dense is the right word. And I know Jared doesn't like the word dense, but it felt more like a meal in the writing, and I thought that really worked. And as the story was going on, I was watching it, and I was going, okay, okay, okay. And by the time we got to the end of the sample, where we're in kind of like this mental hospital place, I was like, okay, this is interesting. And there was a little details that popped out at me that I think can blossom the material a little stronger, because that's we'll get to that when we get there. But in what I thought was interesting was it was well told, and the details that were there showed that kind of creativity. So what I guess what I'm trying to say is that there was a foundation of a spark there of something original, something interesting, something that kept me kind of going. And honestly, to that end, there already are even technical pieces. For example, opening with your protag and her man already together. Thank you. You know, little details like that really do plus things a lot, and moving it along faster and faster rather than kind of having to drag our feet around was really spectacular. To this end, I guess while we're here, I made my notes of the things that I liked that stood out to me a lot. I love this idea of taxpayers paying for this mental hospital come around and having the hospital in general. And I'm gonna bring that back up there. I loved the description of the Fey Kingdom's spring flowers. I don't know what it was, but I was like, I'm there. It's very important. I heard sirens as a species. I was like, well, that's interesting. Sirens, well, how does that work? And for the record, that is a wonderful thing about any kind of fantasy story. If you can get the reader to go, what's that? How does it work? That's a really, really good sign. But yeah, I thought it was really well written. So it's interesting to say about high school because I can see that he said having written like trash when he was in high school. Like I put myself entirely into the hot seat there. But I thought it was really well written, and by well written, it feels like all my suggestions you can exchange the skeleton bones and make for stronger bones. But I don't think the whole enchilada needs to be a different kind of skeleton. The bones are already there. We just maybe need to exchange certain pieces because I can see it coming together pretty well.
Yay, that is really high praise. Thank you so much. And I agree. Like when I started it in high school, I actually had two scenes. It was a completely different book. And I had two scenes where she went shopping. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that was my age. And then, like, probably 5 years ago now, is when I sat down and wrote it in 3 months. But yeah, no. So I'm right there with you of like, my writing has definitely changed since high school. Thank you so much for the kind words.
I think it's also interesting that all of us started out writing as children in middle school and high school, and then that grew into a career with filmmaking, editing, storytelling, and looking back, because you do learn and grow, and writing comes from such a deep part of yourself. It's always funny to look back on stuff that I wrote in my high school years, and most of it I just want to like cringe my eyeballs out. But there is something really special in being able to see this is how I saw the world. This is where my brain was learning about how the world worked. And this is what was important to me then. So I think that you can always, even if people say it's juvenile writing, I personally think there's still a lot of value in that. And the sentence structure itself isn't juvenile. So you just plus up the story itself and make the structure work. And then you have still a beautiful story that came from a young perspective. So I don't think there's anything wrong with being a young writer, although I do see being a young writer myself, how growing and letting a story marinate through all that change that your brain does makes it eventually a much richer story.
I just, my thing about, because I totally agree with what you're saying. I think it's funny that at the time, shopping was the most important thing. And I love the shopping montages and movies. I'm like, I must have one of those. So I do have a little tiny bit of that towards like the middle to end of the book to have like an homage to, again, like you said, like kind of like the roots, like where it started.
Yep. I will say most of the notes that I took down about what's working is specifically pulling out parts that for me hooked me, because it felt like a fresh and true perspective on the world and how the world works. So the first line that really struck me was, so I was stuck feeling restless in this perfect cage with my perfect family. That to me spoke of there's an odd kind of guilt of feeling trapped, but trapped somewhere that's perfect. So there's like nothing worth complaining about, but you still feel wrong inside. And I think that these kinds of truths that no one really likes to say out loud and people feel guilty admitting out loud is what you really want to lean into, because that's where people need to be seen by a story. That's where people are going to see themselves in your story and immediately relate to your protagonist, even more so than a shopping montage, because, you know, we all shop. And another interesting thing, this immediately jumped out to me, and this is a callback to all of our other episodes we've done with dark fantasy writers. Charles, I know that we've had some fun suggestions thrown out there for this topic.
Think about my smut suggestions.
Yes, I am.
I'm not sure about that.
No, I
Sorry.
was gonna say, you described, your description of a fey male was very unique and realistically flawed, which immediately piqued more interest for me than if he were a stereotypically handsome and flawless hot male that we're used to seeing in these kinds of stories. Because seeing a flaw there makes him feel more real, and it's a way to really combat a lot of these toxic stereotypes that makes people, you know, there are people kind of getting fed up with this genre. So being able to put something fresh and true and real into a genre that's starting to get stale in that way is very good. That was amazing instinct for you, especially as, you know, I don't know if that part came from your rewrite or from the first version of it, but that was a really great instinct that even with other seasoned writers that we've been working with on this podcast is something that we usually have to bring up. Next thing was, and this is something that may come or go depending on, you know, you mentioned wanting to take it to a darker tone. Something I thought of is, there's this quote, and I forget who said it, but it's writing advice that I've kind of taken to heart because I love a dark fantasy. Someone said, make it grim, make it dark, but then for the love of God, tell a joke. And the line that really made me laugh was, Matthias stormed off into the woods yelling at squirrels who yelled right back at him. And that just, to me, it was like, it made me feel comfortable in this story. That felt like a joke to me that worked with the tone of the story. And again, I don't know if you want to take it darker, if you want to kind of lean away from that cheeky humor, but I really loved it. I think that it can go well even as you make it darker, being able to bring in the laughter so we can appreciate both the light and the dark. The next thing that really stuck out to me was, you know, a mature mindset, a mature thing that was hinted at. Fear of losing what you have is a realistic, universal human emotion that made me relate to Cassius. Tell me if I'm pronouncing that right. Is that correct? Cassius. Okay, thank you. It made me relate to him because, you know, he didn't want to tell anyone about his relationship with Genevieve, and that little bit of humanity that peeked out again for me made me relate to him and made me want to root for him and sympathize with him, because I think we all, you know, it's a universal thing. We can all relate to wanting to keep something for ourselves because you're afraid of losing it or someone else ruining it when it's put out there. With his backstory, it made sense why he would be afraid to lose it in telling her parents that, you know, I'm not royalty, but I want to marry your daughter. And then the last thing, two more things. This also has to do with a trope that I felt you subverted very, very masterfully. I typically hate the arranged marriage trope even more than the pregnancy trope, just because I feel like it kind of screams a lazy plot device. But in this story, you handled it with an appropriate depth. It actually felt like a natural twist that was like a surprise, as opposed to something that was just shoehorned in because someone was like, well, we have to, you know, make the female seem like she's oppressed. And that, I really appreciated that you managed a popular and overdone trope very masterfully, and it actually felt like a twist to me and not just like a plot device. And the last thing is Genevieve's backstory of how she got her strength was super intriguing. That is where I got hooked on the story in general. I think that the literary style of that section in particular, if you rewrite it a little bit, you could make it come across even stronger. And I'll get into more of these specific thoughts I have around this a little bit later in the, you know, what we can brainstorm how to improve section. But the story of, she feels like she has this hole in her memory of, she doesn't know how she got to be the person that she is. And there's a lot of shame surrounding that because she doesn't know who she hurt, or she remembers who she hurt, but you know, that's a hard thing to hold. And for her having to keep it a secret and then revealing it, it immediately made me feel intrigued. And that's where I got hooked. So that is good to keep very soon in your openings. When we get back around to talking about theme, I'm curious if that's going to be something that you plant in the beginning and becomes a thread throughout.
I would like to second that about the arranged marriage switch up stuff. And I also was reading that, and it did feel more like, instead of, no, this is a fantasy story, it felt like the walls were closing in more. And I also noticed that. Thank you for reminding me about that, Jayla.
Okay, so great points everybody made. Brie, did you have anything you wanted to say to Jaylon's thoughts, or did you rather wait till later, to the end?
Wait till the end because I'm having a good time listening to all the really nice things. I'm perfectly fine. Keep talking me up, please. Have a good time.
We always start really nice, and then we go down into the weeds and start digging.
I'm
Okay.
ready.
So what worked for me, I will say that the first thing that stood out to me was the thing that Charles talked about, of the immediate chemistry and romance of the two characters, Cassius and Nevi. I was thinking as soon as I read it. So, but to be honest, when I read it, when I started reading it, I was like, okay, I don't want to do this, but I'm going to do this. And it was a journey. And as I was going through it, and then as soon as I start, I read about, the carriage wheel and not in the first line, and I was like, oh, this is where we're going. So let's go. And as I'm going, I start seeing Caius and Nevi's relationship immediately, and I was like, oh, I'm interested now. Because I don't have to wait 50 million pages to get to, this. It's not a slow burn thing that I have to deal with. Like, you threw us right in the middle of the action, and that anybody who's listened to the show knows throwing us right into the middle of the action at the beginning is my favorite thing that anybody can ever do, because my ADHD will not tolerate anything else.
I was messing with Jared the other day, telling him like the amount of times he has given advice on this show that someone needs to die in the first chapter.
Kill someone immediately.
Kill or sex. Kill or
yes.
sex. I want either one. I don't care which one has to be one or the other.
Exactly. And that's what I was thinking when I read this, and you made my neurodivergent brain so happy by doing that. So thank you. I did think there was going to be a smut scene, and I was like, okay, I do believe in action right up front, but I didn't think it was coming this fast. But then it didn't happen, and I was like, okay, cool. I was like, I don't know if I was ready. I don't know if I was ready for this at 5 a.m. This is a lot. No.
Mine are tiny slow birds.
Yes, it was definitely the chemistry was there, the sexual tension was there, and I was like, okay, I feel this, got me. So as I moved on, the other thing that I really liked, Charles again and I share similar thoughts, was the social and economic world building. I liked the little things, like the guards talking about the guards' wages, or like treaties and class dynamics, and just like, the mental health facility. All of that all felt fresh to me. There are some people that when you read fantasy, especially, the stuff that's really popular on like Book Talk, and even stuff that's not, you tend to find that the best authors are the ones that are really able to paint the picture on the back wall really, really well, without making it look like they were painting the Sistine Chapel or something. And so when you're able to do that, that's really, really awesome. And it's the little things. I always try to do that myself in my writing, and I love to see it when other people do it. It's just like the little stuff that ordinarily we don't think about, because it's got nothing to do with, what we're really here for. We came for the sex and the violence, and I don't give a shit about the wages. But then it's like, oh wait, I do care about the wages, and I care about taxes and war that are happening, that is not the center focus, but it's like, it's that thing that's happening over there, over the trees, and that's kind of cool. So I enjoyed that. Doubling down on the Castell Sanctuary, I really, really, really liked it. I have experience with those types of facilities, from actual psych hospital to group homes, so I had a very, very emotional reaction to it, a good emotional reaction of like, I recognize this place, and like, I sort of was just hoping that this evolved into like a One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest story, but in fantasy, which would have been awesome. But I was like, no, I'm enjoying the ride. So that was solid. I really did like that. I also really liked Nevi's Hidden Power. I liked that. To me, it was exciting. I'm a big fan of dark fantasy. I like dark fantasy. I like it. The darker it is, the better. And when the protagonist the protagonist is questionable, that's awesome. If they have questionable abilities or things that they can't control or things that and they've done harm to other people with it, oh my god, I love you. So that's that's perfect. Perfect. So when I was seeing that and like her past experience and the fact that she has like no memory of any of that, normally I don't love memory loss tropes. Every time I read one, I always think of the Born Identity. I don't know why, but I just always think that. And I'm always just like, if this person doesn't have super spy powers in the story now, it just doesn't matter. But in this particular story, as it was going, I was like, I don't mind that. I don't mind that, especially because it's not one of those stories where like the character wakes up with no memory and then the whole story is about them trying to figure out all this other stuff, and it's before they have a life that they've built after the memory loss. And this is a story where this character has a specific period of time in her life, has no memory of it, but was still able to go on with their life and do things and fall in love and all that other stuff. And I think that's kind of interesting to me. This tells me that this is a character that can move forward with uncertainty and still overcome obstacles. She's already done that before the story's even started. And I like that. The other thing is I did like the conflict potential, the forbidden romances. I do also hate arranged marriages. And when I did see it, I was conflicted because a part of me was like, no, I don't want to see that. But then it was like, then it was also like, I like this world and I like the people involved, so I might want to see it. So I'm cool. I'll let this go. And then when I read the outline and it talked about the triangle that's looming as well, I was like, oh, it's gonna do both of those. Okay, I'll watch it. Hopefully someone dies, but if not, it's fine. I accept that.
We're really exposing ourselves as the authors who love torturing their characters.
I'm a serial killer author. It's what I am.
100%.
But yeah, the whole forbidden romance thing, I like that. I like the family drama. I really enjoyed that. I'm a big fan of actually Zeylon and Charles do not share my enthusiasm for teen dramas such as The OC and One Tree Hill, but I'm a big fan of melodrama, and family drama falls under that. So mom and dad weeping over their daughters, both of their daughters' problems. I'm like, oh, this is 90210 fantasy edition, and I'm cool with that. No, but I like the family drama. I like the talk of mental health, even the small glimpse of it that we got. I really like that. I'm always a big fan of when people put mental health stuff into stories. As a person with mental illness, and neurodivergence, it's always important to me to see characters and worlds where that stuff exists, even if the main character isn't necessarily involved in it. To know that it exists in the world, people are struggling, people deal with, you can find yourself in those kinds of characters, and so that a level of care to me matters. So yeah, those were all the things. There were more, but it will get long, and I'm not gonna do that to us. But yeah, so that's what was working. So now we will move to the dun 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 part of the show. This is Jaylon did give the disclaimer. I also I want to give a second disclaimer that, or more focused version of it, that all of this is subjective, and all suggestions later, as well as within this section, are take them or leave them. Or just know there are options, or hopefully they help you to spark other ideas and stuff like that. So we're never mean, but just wanted to put that out there before we get started.
Promise you I'll be perfectly fine. I do believe that as long as which I'm not saying you guys, but in general, constructive criticism is meant to be constructive. So as long as we're not being like, this is shit and you need to like overhaul, and I mean, like, there's very tactful way. So I have just know I'm gonna be perfectly fine. And I'm very excited to hear what you guys really have to say, because that's what I want to zhuzh this up. I'm ready.
Appreciate That's awesome.
So, Charles,
Kick it up.
lead the way.
So before I say anything, you said you want to take this in a new direction. What kind of direction? What's the tone?
Honestly, I love my story. Sometimes I'll go back through and just kind of reread stuff. I'm like, dang, I wrote this. This is so cool, and I've been thinking, because you guys even said people don't really. Some people love the arranged marriage. Some people don't. Some people love the pregnancy. Some people don't. Some people really love, love triangles. Again, some don't. And so I have a lot of tropes that aren't as popular, but I do feel that I have spun it enough. So I guess the big one that I am open to changing because I centered is a pregnancy one, but I centered the entire middle part of the story around her pregnancy. And just give you an idea, because you guys didn't get to read all of it. She gets pregnant by her mate. She, finds out she's pregnant in the hospital. She goes to her pregnancy. Riven, love Riven. We got Riven, he's with her. He's like taking care of her. They have like not enemies to lovers. They started off killing each other, but obviously they're more, they go along, they care more about each other. But she does end up losing the baby because she gets kidnapped. She has a miscarriage, loses the baby, and they end up even bonding harder because she believes that she's never going back home. She's like, I know I got pregnant by somebody. If it's not you, it's somebody. I think I have a person, but I think we're stuck here forever and I'm okay with that. Let's just be together. And then at the end, it turns out it's a whole thing, but he accidentally stabs her. It's a whole thing. And she gets ripped back into her world and where everything comes out about who she is, what's happened, who Cassius is, the family drama, kind of info dumpy, but we have to have some answers, right? We have to have some answers in book 1 to get people interested in finding out about book 2. So again, the pregnancy trope is a huge thing, and I'm open. I feel like I'm getting too rambly. I'm open to changing that if it's really people are not going to like it, but I do think it's different. Oh, the memory loss. The other one's the memory loss. Either you don't or you do. Again, I've stacked a lot of things, but because it is so fresh and different, I do think it could work. And when I mean by dark, like kind of like darker, there are some scenes where I'm like, I wouldn't mind if this scene specifically went a little bit more. Riven and her have a scene in an underground bunker library where he kind of like pushes her limits a little bit, but I could push even more. So it's not like I want to change the story itself unless it needs to, depending, or adding scenes or whatever that is. So I guess a different direction would just be if something really is not working, I don't mind reworking it. I hope that kind of answered.
So to that end, mainly the details that I noted when I was writing my notes mainly have to do with, I know this sounds odd because I just complimented the execution. What was the execution? Because yes, a lot of it is well written, but I felt, especially by the time I got to this hospital, that I felt there was something a little bit more realistic going on. And I felt the language was perhaps a little flowery. And I'll get around to that. But I mean to say that I feel like mainly my thing with fantasy, and I brought this up in prior episodes, but it stands by because it's such a fascinating conundrum. Even I was daydreaming an idea 2 weeks ago, and I was running into this problem. Is that at least my issue with fantasy is that it's so fairy tale predictable, seen tropes again and again and again. The Lord of the Rings was published in the 50s, so we're dealing with 70 years of the same things over and over and over. And yet, if it's not that, then it's not fantasy, and it's not the ice cream flavor that we wanted. And because you don't want to ask for cookie dough ice cream, someone gives you vanilla. You want that. So the trick that I've thought of is you can do tropes, you can do all that stuff, but you have to find a way where it feels not necessarily new. You just have to care about it. And usually that makes it from personal standpoints, personal elements. A big example I've now usually bring up is the Netflix cartoon, The Dragon Prince, because on paper, The Dragon Prince is ridiculously cliche. You have two kingdoms, dragons, elves, medieval architecture and technology and magic and blah, blah, blah. And sure, the world building is very interesting, but what makes it work is that everything always goes back to a personal element. So that was the first fantasy I ever heard of characters having a divorce. I was like, what on earth? That's amazing. So if you keep that in mind for your whole thing, I think that is what can elevate everything, because basically, so for example, pregnancy. Pregnancy. A huge thing of concerns, future anxieties, medicine, medical issues, scheduling, that. If you sink the teeth into that, I think you can kind of do whatever the heck you want because you're making the characters suffer in a way that we can relate to. And this is more of a general statement, but it brings back to my main points here is I think the telling of it, you can cut a few sentences, cut a few words, tighten things a little bit in the delivery because I think, correct me if I'm wrong, based on what you said, based on what I've read, it feels like this story wants to be a little bit harsher. Is that correct?
Like darker or not as flowered. Like you said, I had a lot of flowery.
Yeah, a little bit more intense, a little bit more harder PG-13. Is that correct?
Yeah, I don't want it to vibe with young adult. I don't want someone to mistakenly be like, "Oh, hey, let's put this in a school." You know, they're trying to put twisted love in schools. I'm like, "No, we're not doing that. That's crazy." You know, so yeah.
So I'm on the right track then. So with Cassius and Jalen, you said that he was framed differently. I must have missed it. Forgive me. Sometimes I do miss these things. But to that end, I was saying I pictured our protag's man as being, he's perfect and he's sexy. And I was said, well, give him like an ugly nose, because that, just give him one little imperfection because I think it's just more. But mainly to this end, most of my details had to do with the execution because I feel, in my experience of both reading and writing and editing, if you drag your feet, if someone feels like they have to get through so much just to get to a little bit, they're going to get bored. They're going to get frustrated and it becomes this flowery thing. So if you can change a lot of the execution, it would feel a little bit faster, which you've already done with the plot anyway. So you can get to it. So, for example, the notes I had were, I feel, and again, as Jaylon said, and Jared said about our disclaimer, all subjective. But for me, I would recommend not dumping all the fantasy world exposition. I feel that really confuses the reader when you drop too much stuff and you have to stop and explain it. And I thought, for example, Gauntlet the horse, it's like Gauntlet was from this other kingdom. Interestingly, the reason I actually came that up because I read the horse, I was like, ooh, that's really interesting. And then it was like, it stopped. And we had to go into the world building. And I was sort of thinking, I said, well, maybe what you could do is, let's say she has to ride the horse somewhere, right? It's like, he was really fast because he was from here. And that's why I had it. And it's like, and the reader goes, oh, so that freaky deaky horse, the reason it's freaky deaky, kind of a setup and a payoff later. I think that's really fit. An excellent example of this is when I played, oh Lord, I played it 11 years ago. It's so long. When I played Final Fantasy VII, you're thrown into this world and there's these name drops of like Avalanche, Shinra, and I was like, what's going on? But that wasn't the main part of the plot. It was the plot. And as we went along, I picked it up. It's like, oh, okay, I can pick it up. So for example, good source. Okay, that's clearly their oh my gosh. So fine, that's good. So I don't think you need to dump all the fantasy exposition because I feel like if someone doesn't know fantasy, they're going to be lost. If they do know fantasy, they have to cross-reference it with every D&D homebrew world they've worked with and et cetera, et cetera. So I think if you could piecemeal it, I think that'd be really sharp. And I did see some of that too. Back to some of like the flowery elements. It doesn't have to be a small village. It's just a village. I'm smiling. I don't mean to come and said. I just thought that was very funny because it just reminded me of some of the stuff that I had written back in high school. It's just a village because village is small. So to that end, that was my kind of tying in. Just remember, especially today when like D&D players are massive celebrities and, this fantasy subgenre is all over the entrance of every Barnes & Noble Books a Million, is that I think fantasy shorthand is much better understood now. So you can just say a village. But instead of saying it's a small village and that creates a picturesque image, you could say it's a village and you could say it's like smelled like hay. Because we already know what a village looks like in the fantasy world, but maybe we don't know how it smells or we don't know how the light works, because basically now everyone has read this stuff much more, so you can play with that. To this end, you can dig deeper. There's a comment about an upbeat tune, and I went, what does that sound like exactly? Because, and not that you can like show the music or play the music in prose, but I was thinking, I said, what does an upbeat tune look like? Are people dancing their feet up and down? Is it more of like a clapping sort of thing? And I thought that was really interesting. So it was those little details that I think you can dig. That's, for me, that's world building. For me, that's what makes things super interesting, because you start to see not how a world works in a fantasy piece, but how the people live. I think if you dig into that, that'd be fantastic. To this end, unless I missed it, which is highly possible, I didn't understand what the werewolves look like. And I think that's really interesting because I like that idea of werewolves, because werewolves are such an interesting kind of a creature because, technically they're cursed, but they're human. And so I wanted, when we were going to this tavern here, I wanted to know, like, how are they distinguishable? What defines them a little bit better? I really wanted to know that because it was interesting. I was like, how does she know they're werewolves? Do they have scars? Is it their clothes? And that was really interesting. I also noted Nevi, my love. So these kind of flowery language. One way you can shake it up is think about this. In your fantasy world, is there equivalent of the word babe? That was kind of my thought. I was like, I wonder if you could do that. Again, a lot. I'm gonna skip over actually something else I wrote here because a lot of it is just kind of cutting cutting the words down and making it a little less passive. So instead of the boy survived, but only just, you could say the boy only just survived. Harder. Again, a little bit one was, yes, I may be the princess of Fae, and I may have been brought up in a traditionally royal household, but in my insistence, that is where the similarities end. I said, well, maybe you could try. Yes, I may be a royal bitch, but that's. And I thought, say it without saying it. I thought
Yeah.
was my
Yes, I like that.
and then I felt this arm contest where it's like, I know she's going to win because it's a thing. So I thought, well, if Nemi has all this strength, how does she feel when she has constant strength? So can she tease her opponent or kind of get to know playfully there? Because I was thinking like, if she's really strong all the time, how does she feel knowing she's going to win this fight? What then does that show the better side of her, playful, or does it show a little bit more of the vain, darker side she may have to deal with this? I did want to ask, how did Nevi feel about her man not wanting to marry her? But actually, that really came up later of just her imagining children with him. And I was like, I get it. Like instantly, I understood that because I was like, oh, she's really thinking.
Yep.
And I thought that was really nice. Final detail of how you can be. This is similar about shaking up sentences, but in a different way. So instead of trying to be, this is how maybe you can say something very poetic without having to have a lot of sentences that you want to say. And his eyes, my one favorite feature of his for a non-sexual reason. Maybe I thought you just come to wrote it down, doodled it. Is this idea, and his eyes, a feature so lovely they were beyond sex. You can say these same things, but in a little.
Remember that line?
And
If you said, I'm like, I don't like it. I want to change that immediately.
And to that end, it's interesting that honestly, for a non-sexual reason, that's a high school line. That is a very young person who doesn't know how to say. And again, I say this because I used to write like that. You can find ways to do that really well. So there's, in general, some structural issues, very easy
Yep.
fixing. But as a whole, my main recommendation would be if you're gonna go full on trope, and that's fine. That's not a criticism at all. But if that's what you're gonna do, yes, you gotta make it original, and yes, you gotta take your stand on it, and yada yada yada. But I would definitely recommend lean really into the details of how these people feel about what they are enduring. And you're already on the right track there. But I would recommend digging into that through the language of making them feel really not human. That's not quite the right word, but something that we can understand intrinsically because we go, oh, And one of those instances I think I had was her thinking about having children with her man because I was like, yeah, I can kind of see that where it's like, I just want this. Why can't I have this? And I think if you can lean more into that through the technical structure, which is why I mentioned the skeleton's there, we just got to make it like a stronger bone instead of a less brittle bone. The reader will follow you through your tropes, through maybe stuff they've seen before and they're not interested in, or through your world, because it'll be put through the perspective of something that feels very, very real, where it's like, it's not, oh, some fake princess is pregnant. It's like, she's pregnant. What the hell is this? What now she has to deal with this and the mental thoughts and she's in this different world and now it's cold and it smells and her shoes hurt her feet and now she starts wearing, oh no, her feet gonna hurt and the pregnancy keeps going, stuff like that. And I think I bring this up because I'm already seeing elements in the text like that. So long story short, got some of the weeds of the flowery language, and then so the seeds of that, I guess it is humanity, I guess, can start sprouting. If that all makes sense.
No, it does. When someone, I forgot who it was, said about humor, Jalen, was that you?
Yes.
So I have a scene where Riven, Nevi, and then they get another guy to drive them to the next location for the witch. they find out in the text a witch has information that they need to possibly, so they're gonna like, let's go find this witch, let's go get her. And so they're driving and she used to sleep. Again, she's pregnant, fake pregnancies. I tried a little bit of research, are a little bit different. And then I got like a little elf guy in there named Talbot who gives her some like medicine, like fae medicine. Anyways, but there's a specific scene. They stop at a gas station and she wakes up and Riven and the guy are both looking at her and she's like, what? He's like, you're snoring. She's like, I don't snore. He's like, yeah, you are. So it was like a cute little moment where she's snoring. He's like, so bringing in the humor, bringing in, these people are sure they're fae, just like her dark promise. I don't know what it's like to be a queen, but I also know sometimes what feminine rage is, guilt, regret. So 100% thank you, Charles. I definitely am very excited because I agree. Because the line that you read me about, like, oh, in a non-sexual way, I'm like, I would have taken that out immediately. I'm like, that was me. That might have been the other friend. I'll just blame it on her.
Unfortunately, even though it's sad to have an ex-friend, it is nice when you have someone to blame things on.
I'll do it all day, any day. I'm an only child, so that might be a little bit. I finally have someone to blame something on. Yeah, no, coming back to it, I'm right there with you. I agree with everything you said, and I am really happy that at least the bare bones in your eyes and Fenya is good. We just got to we gotta like just make it a little bit tighter, like a little harder with like some of the language. And I think at that time I was a little more flowery because I didn't really know, like, again, how to or understand how to world build. Like sometimes I'm like, what is world building? But you're right, it's what is, because I'm currently working on a story. It's a part of this like spoof fairy tale. I can't talk about it yet, but there's a specific scene from the movie that I'm retelling that I want to put in like a little tiny little part. So when you see it, you're like, oh, that was in the movie. So there's like details and little things. And that is part of the world building. That's a part of this world that I'm trying to retell in my own words, but also keep true to that story. So yes.
Yeah. And voice too it's something that develops over time. And I think for me, especially starting out writing so young, we've had this conversation on the podcast too. If you start out so young and you start by imitating, and then you have to go through the journey of finding out what your voice sounds like maybe you start out, you're studying people who are considered the greats of writing, and you say, okay, this is what I'm supposed to sound like. But then you have to go back and realize, no, what I'm supposed to sound like is something that only I can sound like, and no one has ever written it before. So that's an interesting thing that as story coaches, it's a part of writing that you really can't just teach it. You have to just coach someone through that journey of finding themselves and finding their voice to the point where they can recognize it. And then they can say, I wrote that. I recognize my voice in that. And I don't recognize my voice in this.
Non-consensual. That was not me.
It's very interesting, Charles. I think that a lot of your notes lined up with some of mine, and I dove into some more details about it, picking up from where I left off with her backstory of how she got her strength. My suggestion for spicing up that section was going to be lean into a literary style that kind of reads less like a info dump trip down memory lane where we have a flashback and they narrate it as if like you're now in that timeline, and narrate it with us still anchored in Genevieve where she is, but she has like these flashes of dark memories as the present action is going on, because that mystery of like what did happen to her and how does this affect her, how does this darkness follow her through her everyday life as she has like learned to move on from it. I think drawing out that mystery through more details and conversations as the story goes on, giving her more memory flashbacks, is going to make readers follow you even more through those details, instead of like having a point of view jump where you have this whole flashback right there. Say maybe instead of explaining everything that she remembers about how she hurt this boy, you can say she remembers the blood, she remembers the screaming, she remembers staring at the short plank of wood in the door that she could see because she was short, through tears in her eyes, banging on the door, crying for her mom and dad because she was locked in there. Those little flashes are more realistically what we get when we're living with trauma like that, and still trying to move on from it, but keep us anchored in the present action, and then let that mystery kind of draw out a little bit more. Give us, drop little breadcrumbs of details. You don't have to give us all of the details right when you mention it. And that kind of goes along with something else I noted that Charles noted was some of the info dumping, because the world building was really awesome, but some of it read a little bit like info dumping, and it just is a matter of being strategic with your details. So as Charles was saying, key to remember is at the beginning of your story, your readers don't care yet about investing their mental energy into immediately understanding and remembering all the details about your world and your character's backstory. They just need one detail that resonates with something deeper inside of them, and then they'll be enticed to invest more in your story and be like, okay, I'm here to remember another detail. I'm here to learn more about this. And usually those details are things that bring up the humanity, like the universal human truths that we all relate to, such as being scared to share something because you don't want it taken away from you, or feeling like this darkness is following you, or feeling guilty because you feel trapped but you have a perfect life. Those kinds of things are what initially entice your readers to start remembering more of your details. It makes them feel like they're falling into a world instead of having to study a textbook. You kind of have to use that trail of breadcrumbs to entice them a little bit more. A trick for making sure that you're not info dumping in any information that you do give is relate any factual detail given about your world to how a character, as Charles again said, feels about it, how it impacts their life. So for example, and this is something that, again, I saw throughout your story. So a lot of these notes are like, this was good, do more of that. One of them being when Genevieve was talking about the Great War. She said, I never understood why they called it great instead of terrible, since it wiped out, a third of the kingdom or whatever. That's a good detail that we are going to remember because we're already invested in the main character at that point, because we relate to her through those universal human truths. And then we're going to understand more about the world through her eyes, not just like a factual, this thing and this is why. It's how I feel about this, if that makes sense. I hope that tip is helpful.
No, it is. So I am a big info dumper. My editor is always like, girl, what are you doing? Save this. She's like, keep this, but she's like, put that somewhere else. And so I get very flowery, and then we hone things and we keep honing stuff in. So 100% the info dump, I very much agree. Sometimes because the way I write, I've now learned that I call myself a puzzle writer.
Yeah.
I want to make t-shirts. So I have these different scenes. So I also write what just comes out of my head. So I put it all there, and then I go back later. Again, now I do. And I'm like, oh, I can actually now put this actually over here. But at the time, I'm like, I don't know where this is going to fit. But I think that's why I end up info dumping, just to kind of probably get it out. But I agree that is one of the things that I need to really, I put a lot of pressure on my editor. I'm like, fix that, please. It's not my job.
It is very much a stage thing, because I write like that too. Like, you have to get it all out first, and then you can puzzle piece it into where it's supposed to go. So this is more like a general blueprint of how you can fit those puzzle pieces together and know what needs to be cut, what needs to be pasted, all that.
And then real quick about the powers, I forgot to mention. So Nevi I think I've already talked about, they have a source. They have a source of power. So spoiler, Nevi's the source. So that's why I was having a really hard time explaining it, keeping it a mystery while she's remembering. That's why she doesn't have any memories about when she's little, because she started as this entity, this like ball of light, this thing. She morphed herself into a fae. So she's not even fae, but she portrays to a fae because those are the people that were taking care of her. She blended in. So she turned herself into a fae girl, and to hide herself. Then she did get kidnapped by the king and queen, and that's how she ended up in her situation. Turns out, of course, she is now the source of power. That's why they're keeping her, and like the werewolves, and they're all trying to keep her under lock and key. That's the motivation. So thank you for the tips on like how to still bring it up without really bringing it up until I need to bring it up.
Yeah, and it is just like sprinkling those breadcrumbs, just kind of enticing your reader along, because your mechanics are very solid. I could tell that you learned how to write the same way I did, which is like reading a lot and then knowing how to describe things and do dialogue well from all that reading. The only other note I had, and this kind of goes with like more tips of how to not info dump, but be careful with over describing because you have really great descriptions, but sometimes you can trust your readers to pick up on tones and hints. So like in dialogue, people are really bad about saying exactly what they mean. So sometimes in dialogue, less is always more. You never want to have a character come out and say exactly what they mean because then it feels like it doesn't feel realistic anymore. It's that kind of over describing, and then you fall into you're telling, not showing. So, for instance, the line, I ran down the long hallway, passing by numerous people who stared at me in shock. They should know by now, the dangerous, unwieldy princess. Of course, I am shocking. That is a great example of show, don't tell. I felt like an undertone of bitterness and self-guilt that gives us a clue into her inner world. So do more of that and less of I felt and then over describing, or as Charles said, just cut some words here and there to make it sharper. The last thing that's kind of like an overarching thing is I noticed a couple things of inconsistencies. So for example, at first she says she wants to get out more and learn how to be a better advocate and spokesperson to serve her people. And then obviously when you hear that this future you've been planning for yourself is being taken away, and you have her panic attack over this arranged marriage that's happening that disrupts her plans for like a quiet, peaceful life with Cassius, the way that she reacts to that and the call to responsibility from her parents to be a queen for her people, have more of a conflict there in that inner turmoil, because there is a dichotomy that like we are contradictory as humans. Like it is possible to want to be something, want to have that responsibility, but also be really mad when we get that responsibility. But if you highlight that more, that's another way to pull out like, this is a way people can relate to her humanity, even though she's not human, she's Fae. But it's a way to hook people into this is how to understand her and relate to her. Another little inconsistency was, and this was like kind of looking ahead, I'm not sure, you said she ended up in the hospital in the human world. And some things you just want to make sure, like a reminder of making sure to connect dots in your details. Make sure that it's clear whether that it becomes a problem that like that she might be found out that she's Fae and not a human in that hospital. And also with Cassius, maybe drop a few breadcrumbs or a few hints from the beginning that he's not her mate, or add some more details that help us understand when her parents do present to her, like, we're having an arranged marriage for you. And she says, Cassius is my mate. Like, are there some rules, some laws that go along with mating that would affect how that situation plays itself out? Those little things, just quick reminders, again, as you go through all the editing process, because that's kind of like in the later stage of refining your draft. And I think that's it. That's basically all I have. I'm sorry I rambled so much, but most of it connected to what Charles had to say.
Yeah, thank you.
So, first of all, Charles, thank you for branding the term freaky deaky horse into my head, because now I can't stop thinking about it. So thank you for that. So for me, the things that needed work were like very situational stuff. I don't know if that's a redundant statement, but in essence it was just situational stuff. My first like big like stop sign for me was in the first chapter, and really in the first 3 chapters. It feels like there's a lot of names and a lot of stuff coming at me really quickly. In the genre of fantasy, we all know that like there are a bajillion names for you to remember over the course of however long that book is going to be, whether that's like 400 pages or 800 pages. It's a lot. And when you first meet a character, specifically a character that I'm going to spend a significant amount of time with, I want to know as much as I can about them before I start getting introduced into everybody else. And I'm not saying that you should spend the first 3 chapters just getting to know this character. What I mean is that like there was Ophelia, there was the guards, there was Malik, Cassius, and not that Malik was mentioned so much in the first, not at all actually in the first chapter, but like all of these different characters. And then even just like the little like guard and stuff around her, just throwing those all at us was just kind of, at me anyway, was just like, okay, I've got to keep track of who this person is, and one of them likes birds for some fucking reason. And so I would limit the first act to only the characters who are truly gonna matter right now. By that I mean, if someone isn't going to impact Nevi's choices in Act 1, hold them back until later. And then when we do introduce someone, do it through action, not just bouncing from, not that, because it wasn't so much like, oh, it was this name, this name, comma, this name, this name, this name. But it was still like this very rapid succession of it for me. And that made it really difficult to establish, like connect the titles and the relationships together without it being like confusing. So I would just hold some of that back a little bit. That was the first thing. The other thing, this is also a purely a situational thing, but like it wasn't really an argument, but the brief little disagreement between Nevi and Cassius when basically about him not wanting to talk about their relationship as much yet or whatever, which I understood why, or at least I felt like I understood why Cassius was, reluctant. But my first thought was like, is Cassius a fuckboy? Is that what's happening here? But yeah, so I mean that argument specifically, I felt that one, it escalated really quickly. They're talking to each other, escalated to that really quickly, and then it was over really quickly. So I felt like it was really jarring for me because it was like, oh, this is so cute. They get to be together in this little moment they get to have together, and then she drops the thing of like, hey, we should tell my parents and do that, and he's just like, nah. And I was just like, and then and then she, and then they go back and forth about like, why not? And I'm like, okay, so now we're in a fight. This isn't fuck, it's fuck Cassius right now. I'm with you now. And then all of a sudden it was like, I love you, and everything's fine. And I was just like, I felt so many emotions in that like few sentences.
That are complex.
Yeah, fair, valid. It was also kind of the way that they went from being so lovey-dovey to one another, I fucking each other, and all kinds of other like the entire time, and then there was no real friction, at least not to me. I didn't take anything in as like friction between them. To me, it was like, oh, these people have never had a fight a day in their life. This is like the perfect couple, that kind of thing. And then all of a sudden to see them like abruptly get it, layer the small friction first. Show me that these two individuals can disagree with one another, even if it's just playful. Show me that they can do that and build up to it. Whether it be like, I mean, it seemed like everybody kind of knew about their relationship that was out there, whether they agreed with it or not. But I would have found it more interesting if nobody did. And so that's a built-in conflict. Automatically from the beginning, you see these two people who have this love they're not supposed to have. Not just the parents don't know, but it's kind of a thing. Or maybe some of the guard know, but like the bird lady might not know. So I forgot her name, I'm sorry. But ultimately, if they hide that from her and that kind of thing, and then so like even like you can have them if let's say bird lady, I'm gonna just call her bird lady now, I'm sorry. But let's say
I remember her, so that's okay. I haven't read through it yet.
So if we have the bird lady kind of like she's in the back of the carriage with him or whatever, and she's reading her book as she's been doing, and then maybe Nevi reaches for his hand, little pinky to pinky type action or whatever, and he pulls away. And so now we see her get kind of aggravated by that. So it's like not enough to be like, oh, we're gonna spend 2 paragraphs talking about it, but just like a quick sentence of like, oh, okay, it's like that. And then when they go to that whole tavern thing, it's like when that argument happens, it's like it's more she's fed up with this, like what's going on with you, that kind of shit. So that I feel like that would be a cooler way to do that, and less breakneck speeds of emotions. Descriptions themselves, there was moments where it felt like the description was repetitive. Cassius, the description, just to me, it really felt like Nevi was really just obsessed with Cassius, which is totally cool. She described the way he looked on 2 different occasions. So I figured, I was like, oh, she must be really, really into him. But as a reader, I'm also like, okay, I get it. I know what he looks like. I don't think this motherfucker is sexy, so can we move on? So that was the, so I would just, my only thing is like, if you're gonna do it, I think Charles mentioned this, and so did Jaylon earlier, just kind of like mention 1 or 2 things, and then we can move on from there. Generally speaking, I find, at least for me, giving me 1 or 2 descriptors, whether it be like physical or like personality things or whatever, 2 preferably, and then the rest of it I just kind of fill in myself. My brain will just, whoever you envision that person being, I will never see them that way, so it'll just be what I envision them as. And so you don't have to give me a whole lot, and this is more even for writers that are not as experienced as you are. I think a lot of times people write descriptions and they feel like they have to paint the picture of what this person looks like exactly in their head so that it will somehow magically transfer to their reader's head and they'll see it too. But I promise you, writers, they will never see it the way that you see it. So don't even worry about it. Just start with the small enough details and let them fill it out themselves. There was some show don't tell moments, which I feel like Jaylon covered well enough on her own. I don't even need to step on that.
I tried.
You did good. You did good. Dialogue bloat. There was some dialogue bloat to me. Again, Jaylon kind of touched on this too. Dialogue is one of my favorite things to write. So I'm very, 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 very particular about people's dialogue. I studied screenwriting a lot longer than I studied prose, so it was very much focused on getting dialogue really, even though not all screenwriters are big on dialogue, but that's not the point. Dialogue was very important to me. So now I always like that clipped, concise dialogue, that snappy dialogue, unless it's a monologue and it's kind of required. But I feel like monologues are rarely required. So when I read the dialogue, big thing was just like some of this stuff is really great, but there's some really great stuff buried within a whole lot of extra stuff that doesn't need to be there. And I guess that really just depends on the pacing of how you want it to go. So I mean, if you want a more slow burn, slower read type thing, sometimes dialogue can do it. But I've always found the dialogue just always needs to be snappy. And so yeah, for me, I would say just trying to really let subtext and shit like that do the maximum or do the heavy lifting of most of your lines. And I think again, this is more about probably from the youth perspective of a younger person writing it. Everybody mentioned their own journeys with writing as a youth. I will not admit to anything that I did in my youth as far as writing goes, because to never see the light of day, but I do understand certain leanings toward this kind of dialogue. And then there was a question for me about tone and genre. To me, there were parts where it didn't sometimes it felt almost like a YA romantic fantasy with the Sweeney romances and stuff. It felt very teen for me at certain points. But then sometimes it kind of felt like an epic fantasy with like kingdoms and war and really big. And then there were other times where it felt like a dark romance where there was like even just based off the outline than the actual first 3 chapters, but like violence and pregnancy and those kinds of things. I was like, okay, there's a lot of things that are happening here, and I'm trying to figure out who the reader should be. From a reader perspective, I was trying to figure out where do I fit? Where does this fit in my priority list? Is it written for me? Is it not? And I feel like the sooner we set that in motion and make those things clear, the better it's gonna be. Because when I'm in Barnes and Noble, when I'm in whatever, and I pick up a book and I flip through the first whatever pages, if you can tell me in 5 or 6 pages what kind of world I'm living in, what is the tone of this whole thing, and all of that, and I understand that within the first 5 pages, I will buy that book if I dig it. And I felt like it was taking me on a jacked up GPS ride of genre and tone, and I couldn't figure out where I needed to be. I would just make a call as far as what exactly do you want this genre to be, and throw me in the deep end of said genre. As far as the last bit that I had is purely because it's only the first 3 chapters. To me, in those first 3 chapters, the stakes felt really small. To me, Nebi's priority felt like, I want to be with Cassius. I want to be with Cassius. I want to be with Cassius. And that was just it. And it felt like the stakes of that is like, if that was taken away from her, she'd be one really upset young lady at her parents, but she'd get over it and it'd be the end. Or if she didn't, well, that's codependency, but whatever. But so I was like, okay, well, why do I care? Why do I care about, this young lady and her relationship? And so my thing, and this of course is without the outline involved, I just sort of feel like if we figure out a way to tie it into a larger conflict or the bigger overarching story, even if it's not like, there's some of this stuff seems like these are twists and turns or like surprise type of things. You're not supposed to figure it out from the first chapter. Even if we do some small threads that lead us to the pot of what this could be. Like I didn't even know there was, and maybe I just didn't catch it the first time, but I didn't even know there was going to be a human world to begin with. So it was just, so when it was like she was in the hospital, the human world, I was like, oh, we are on Earth now. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
So that kind of thing. I think just giving us those little threads to let us know there's going to be a bigger mystery or a bigger problem would be super helpful. So yeah, those were the only things that I thought needed work.
No, that's amazing because Cassius, because again, we don't find out exactly why until the very end. But I do agree that I can definitely add in like the humans. I'm so glad we don't have to worry about them anymore.
Yeah.
You know, because they don't, because the portals have all been shut down, and that's why it's such a problem for them to go back from the human world to the whatever world that this supernatural world is. So I can totally have some conversations she overhears. I'm like, oh, remember that one time this one human did this? You know,
Or you actually could make a joking homage to Narnia and even have the idea that there's a joke in Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe that Thomas has a book called Is Man a Myth? And, Lucy's, the girl, the human, is seeing the book. So maybe you could even do something like that. So even the reader's going, oh, that's so funny. And then they go to Earth and they go, oh,
I like that. There's just so many different things. And with Cassius, the reason why he in the beginning was like, no, we don't need to tell the parents yet. We're good. Is because the parents gave Nevi a mate to calm her the fuck down. So Cassius was planted there. He's not, which I already told you that he's not the mate, but the parents know about it. So if he were to come actually be a suitor, they'd be like, boy, we told you you're not gonna hang out. You're just a
Dude.
placeholder, so there is that bigger. And then actually I do have plans of maybe making Cassius have like his villain origin story, because he has a bigger role of actually being the next alpha, like the next true alpha. Like he is, I want to say brothers with Malik, but for some reason he was put in the fate. I don't really know yet, but he has alpha blood. So I want maybe do his villain arc. There's gonna be more. The second book's gonna be super dark with Malik having Nevi, because he's gonna kind of keep her on like a chain, kind of like it's Court of Thorns and Roses. How the whole Feyre thing, where she's under the mountain, and he has her, and she's stuck because she has nowhere to go. She's back in the arranged marriage, back in that just hellhole of she's lost her baby, she's lost Riven, she found out all these truths, and she remembers her past. And now we're dealing with a whole bunch of heavy things. So I think in the beginning of this book, it was very kind of sunshine and roses, because Cassius, I didn't want to like cement him because again, she has blinders on because of the spell. So she is very giddy and like, oh my God, I'm obsessed with this guy, because that energy has to go somewhere, because she is the source. So she has all this pent up stuff, right? But yeah, no, so I agree. I think it was me just figuring out how exactly do I navigate these relationships, and I agree, taking out some names, it's info dumpy, taking out some names, spending more time with people, and taking into account a lot of your guys' suggestions on because I do a lot of the whole show and don't tell. So I do a lot of tell. So taking that out and adding certain elements to make sure it all kind of like ties in.
So I'm going to do the developmental thing real quick. I'm not going to go too long. So the pregnancy trope specifically, I thought about. And so you obviously have two options. You could remove it, which would seriously impact your entire story. So the other thing that I thought about, and this is again all suggestion, was I think pregnancy as a trope in general is often a rather weak trope by itself, especially if it's pregnant for pregnant's sake or that kind of a thing. So I think an interesting approach to it is using it as kind of a weapon, more in the sense of you're not in the sense of being preachy, but more in the sense of a darker commentary as opposed to just a trope. So if the storyline becomes a part of the conversation of bodily autonomy or exploitation or who this baby belongs to and the agendas that the world around her would have had for it, as well as her inner power. And you can use both of those as conversations about, especially it would make it rather timely as you start talking about, women and bodily autonomy and worlds outside of themselves having conversations about what a woman should do with her body. And then you plant Nevi right in the center of that with a baby that she has no idea who the father is or what's what and all of that. And she may be trying to wrap her head around, what do I do to be a mom? I was ready to be whatever I was going to be before this. Now I'm going to be a mom. How do I do that? But then also having maybe the kingdom having, if she does make it back, the kingdom having thoughts and plans. If the baby let's say she doesn't lose the baby, hypothetically. She makes it back. you have a whole kingdom that could have plans for this baby. You could have the villain has plans for this baby. And in her mind, she's like, yeah, but what about what I want to do? She's already doing that with the whole situation where she wants to be with Cassius, but she's now in arranged marriage. All of these different things, her entire life is about other people trying to control what she should or should not do, and her wanting to move out of that. I think throwing the pregnancy in that adds an extra layer that I think a lot of women might find really empowering, especially if she makes it through that. I'm not a woman, so I can't tell you exactly, but I'd imagine that I could see how that do. As a man, I see that as a very interesting way to go about it. So I was thinking that was one of the things I was thinking about when it comes to the pregnancy part. The other thing was about love triangles. So typically speaking, I don't love triangles. I find them so overdone, but I really liked the idea of a couple different things. One, turning it from a love triangle to a love quartet. And then I like the idea of the thing that really, 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 to me, makes these things work when it's multiple people is if the partners are thematic. So whoever they choose is either whether it somehow aligns with the theme. So for if it's Cassius, it's love plus rebellion. So it's about being it might be naive and it may be a little self-destructive, but it's that passionate love. And then for Malik, you can make Malik, instead of him being just like a not a good guy, he could actually be not a good guy, but kind of the bad boy that is also kind of redeemable in some way. But he's also very much about power. He's very much about that kind of thing. So for her to be with someone like him, it's about power and stability. For this baby that's about to come, perhaps I need a stable environment. And so it's about, but it would cost her her autonomy. And then you have a guy like Ribbon who is about the truth, who she really wants to be or who she really needs to be. And accepting that leads her to the darkness of her power and all of that other stuff. So you have these different, her choosing between these paths makes it not just, ooh, she's in love, or ooh, I'm team Ribbon, but more it's like, this is not about just who she wants, but it's about who she needs to be or who she wants to be or who she can't help but become. And so the other thing that has to be done, I think, in every love triangle or love quartet is she has to equally want all of them, but choosing one will make her lose something that she wants from the other. So she has to give up something she wants in order to have what she ultimately would need or whatever she ultimately wants to choose. But each person comes with its own trade-off. And I think that you can do that for all of these characters. I'd be excited to see that kind of thing where you have these three different characters from three different perspectives, and her, maybe she does hate Malik at first, but then, and that kind of leans into that whole Thorn shit. I think it's good. I think it's an interesting dynamic to go down. And then the last developmental idea or thing that I would urge you to kick around a little bit, the whole mental health and the Castell Sanctuary. I think that is, it can be so much more than, not that I don't know what it's going to be, but it could be so much more than a set piece. It could actually be a place where you discuss, even if it's just a subplot type of thing. Like if you're dealing with Ophelia and Ophelia is a subplot, antagonistic subplot, and you start to look at how does this kingdom deal with mental health and how do they view them? This is again goes back to bodily autonomy. For Ophelia, every sister, she's not just sick. This is what happens when our system cages someone who resists or or has different ideas about how they should behave. And so having those conversations in that little small snow globe of your story is kind of a cool thing. I think that it can be a wonderful metaphor for how systems tend to pathologize women and label them as crazy or problems, that kind of thing. And this is a wonderful little arena that you could play that in without having to fully rip it from the story or take us away from it in a way that takes us out of it. But those were just some of the ideas that I had. You could use absolutely none of them. They could spark other ideas, which would be really cool too, or you can completely ignore them. But that's some of the stuff that I was thinking when I was reading that.
Thank you.
Of course. So the last part before we open it up to questions, thematic frame. What did the themes say to you guys? How did you perceive it, Charles?
I kind of perceived it in an interesting way about like, it almost felt like our protag here knew which she doesn't know everything about her. It's a mystery, but she knows what she is and what she wants. She was like, I'm going to get it. I can focus on what I know, who I and I can go through things, and then life decides to go, and seeing what she's going to do with them and really test what she knows about herself was really what stuck out to me, especially because, again, in the very opening, she's already got her man, she's already competent, she's a princess, and she knows that, and putting it to the test. So that was very interesting. But now that I think about it, a little bit different for these kinds of stories. That's what really stuck out to me as the thematic propulsion.
This is the most important part of the conversation because all of these different ideas that you have, you can do. There's so many different paths you can go down, and you can make any of them work. But the deciding factor for you is going to be theme. It's going to be, what are you actually trying to say underneath the story? What's the story behind the story that you're trying to tell? What's the truth that you're trying to convey to your audience? And that's going to come from, we kind of saw different threads in there of different ways that it can go, but I'd love to hear from you. We'll throw out our ideas, and then I'd love to hear from you if you have an idea of what you want the central theme to be, because it is something that's going to be the foundation of every decision that you make and everything that happens in the story. Every element is going to hang on and support the theme. So that's ultimately going to be your deciding factor, your clarity on which choice you make for this plot, for this character, for, do we go with this tone or that tone? All of that's going to come down to what your theme is, what you're really trying to say. Some things that I saw that I'm curious if they're going to be developed later, kind of what I mentioned before. She has this self-guilt almost of she doesn't know who she is. And when you're in that place, it's hard to trust that you're a good person. Even if you live as a good person, without knowing, it's hard to trust your identity that it is good. So I think playing with that tension could be a very interesting conversation to have, especially in a story like this. Another detail I thought about was forgiving yourself when you hold things against yourself or feel like you failed at a responsibility that you had. So, for example, she doesn't know who she hurt when this event happened in her childhood. Even though she's moved on from it, it kind of seems like she hasn't quite forgiven herself. It seems like she felt a responsibility to Ophelia. And when Ophelia ended up in the mental hospital, it seemed like there was going to have to be some kind of self-forgiveness that she had to walk through to keep herself from putting all that guilt for that happening on herself, because she wasn't there, because she didn't know the full story, because she couldn't step in, those different things. So I'll let Jared say his take, and then I'll pass it on to you because I really want to hear if you have an idea of where you want to go with this.
So, based on the 3 chapters specifically, just those alone, the theme was saying love conquers obstacles. That was the general idea that I got from it at the beginning. After I read the outline, I'm just going to read my notes so that I don't overspeak. So I realized that it could shift down to 3 things. So it could be pregnancy as commentary, which I discussed, but instead of being a cliche, it's a metaphor for how women's bodies are politicized. Her womb and her source power are treated the same way, something men and kingdoms want to control. If you include the miscarriage then is not just a sad plot point. It's the turning point where Nevi refuses to be defined by what she's supposed to give others. And then you have the psych ward as a systemic critique. The Costello sanctuary stops being just creepy scenery and becomes symbolic for how systems label women as unstable to silence them. Nevi and Ophelia's fates mirror real world cycles of institutionalization and control. And then the third one was romance as rebellion. So loving Cassius or choosing anyone at all stops just being about her indulging herself. It becomes a resistance that says that she chooses intimacy and connection on her own terms. And when romance is colliding with duty and power, it becomes part of a larger fight for selfhood. All of that ultimately is stating that love is rebellion and freedom means no one else decides who you are and what you're worth. So just by the outline and the 3 chapters, that is what I saw the potential for the thing to be. But yeah, those were my thoughts. What about you?
So, Jared, you kind of hit the nail on the head. I honestly wasn't really sure where I wanted to go with it, but I do know in general, I wanted Nevi to, at the end of the day, just want her freedom. Everyone's trying to control her. But that's why she turned from a ball of actual source of light in this concentrated thing, and she morphed herself into a fae baby and, unfortunately got kidnapped and was raised elsewhere, but her entire existence over a millennia or however long that she's been around, I've not got to that part of her lore yet, but no matter what, people are trying to control her. She's not into it. She wants to please everybody. That's how she was raised, to people please and just to do it as she was told. But there's something inside of her that's like, this is not right, which hopefully some of the dialogue, she's like, I just feel trapped. I feel like I feel itchy, there's something wrong. And her mate does help her keep grounded because it is like, I'm choosing this. This is something that I'm choosing. And the fates brought this person to me. And I love this. I love this for me. I can have a simple life. I could live this way. Ophelia was supposed to marry Malik. I can kind of go under the radar and I can have my little peace while still appeasing everybody. But of course, once things start getting unraveled, Ophelia turns out to be in a mental institution and sending someone to kill her. And the parent, there's all these layers. Malik's not a good person. She's like, this is not it. But I agree because that was my biggest question. I'm like, what do I do with the pregnancy trope that people are going to be like, nope, immediately out, So I do think that I really can use it as just another layer of, don't tell me what to do with my body. Everyone's trying to control me. So I think I don't want to take the pregnancy trope out. I really have enjoyed it. The only reason I was going to maybe take it out was because everyone hates it. But I shouldn't do that because a lot of people are going to hate and love a lot of things.
Yep.
To touch on the triangle, it was or quad, it's actually not. And I know you guys haven't got to meet Riven at all, but I do like the advice that you did give. That's why I didn't correct you, because I could go that way if I wanted to. But I did want it to start Cassius's villain arc where he starts, he loves her, but she only loved him because it was forced upon her. So I feel like she can't love anymore because you lied to me. You knew this was happening. You knew who I was this entire time. Like, that was a lie. She doesn't want to be with Malik because he does care about power and he literally wants to control her when her entire being is just let me be free. Like, I'll be the source, I'll do it. But can I just live my own life? But no one will allow her to. Riven is the one person that he does kidnap her. He does try to kill her. But the more they get to know each other, the more she starts talking and this guy feels familiar. I feel calm around him, kind of like mate language. They have their moments, they have their cute moments, their sweet moments, they're more possibly romantic, but there's that pull, I have a baby. So I think now it's kind of making the decision of, do I do the whole miscarriage thing or do I not? So I think I'm going to sit with it because I don't know at this moment, what I'm going to do. I think I need to reread it again and kind of make some mental notes. But I do like this idea, especially in this, Me Too movement and the women's people are, the whole, abortion, what should we do? Government doesn't care. The moment the baby comes, care about people. If they have a miscarriage, women are being arrested and sent to jail, for murder. There's so much. And I just feel like this could really be a political statement. Not I'm choosing a side because I don't want myself to be political, me against the government. But it's just also, I'm a woman. As a woman, as a female, please don't tell me personally what to do. Have your religion, have what you need to do. But the moment it starts affecting my autonomy, that's when I'm going to have a problem. So I think taking it political, but also, like you guys were saying, personal. As women, how do we feel about X, Y, and Z? And also the mental health thing. I agree. Not making it a cute little, I just added it for a little cute little, it's not statement, but a necklace, a piece. I don't know how else to express it, but actually make it a thing. Maybe this is a place where husbands put their wives, kind of taking it back in the day where, she's getting a little too chatty. She's getting a little too crazy. Let's go put her in this. And maybe at the end of the first book, she gets carted off there. Maybe at the end and maybe at the beginning of book 2, he's like, so are you going to act right, honey? Are you going to calm down now? So we can maybe use those triggering language of don't be crazy. Oh, you're acting a little crazy right now. So that kind of triggering language that women are very used to. Think that would just, because again, I write fairy tale retellings. So I have an outline and a pacing and I have the elements, but these are all my elements. And I love this idea. And I think people are really going to love this story even more. And you guys were saying, is this YA? Is this dark? Is this? Because I was working with somebody else, I had to take into their voice into account. So I couldn't truly speak from my heart the way that I would want the story to be written. I did it kind of, but I'm like, she doesn't want to be too dark side. That was always in the back of my mind. So I think really kind of going through it, taking my notes, taking your guys' notes into account, and just really revamping it in a way that's not changing the entire thing. I do think this is different. Like I said, like there's some tropes in there. I feel like I did justice in tweaking it to where it's different enough, and it's not like I think Charles said, another fairy princess. It's true, also I can market it like, hey, here's the tropes y'all don't want, but here's why you should read it. Pregnancy, memory loss, but that's the exact reason why you should read it because, the memory loss adds to the mystery. The pregnancy adds to women being controlled. And it also shows Riven stepping up. And Charles, just so you know, Riven has a scar right along his jaw. So I think I like going harder on what Jared was saying. Hitting harder on, because the original was freedom. I just want to be free. I just want to do what I want, but grounding it in this political type of movement, but also not political, very personal.
Yeah.
Women's rights type of situation without being too political. Because again, it's not one side or the other. It's just humanity. It's just what's common sense. Yeah, you've already answered my biggest question, which do I keep the pregnancy or not? And I think we already answered that. We do keep it. It is pivotal to the story. There's cute moments, and it also keeps apart from Riven needing her to go home. She's like, "You can't hurt me, my baby," and he's like, "Yeah, I'm not a bad guy. I don't hurt a baby, but don't act up." Yeah. So I think it's reworking the first part because people are going to be like, Kasai, oh no. And then like, who's Riven? Oh, so I do introduce 3 men in a shorter amount of time, but we do get a lot more time with Riven. And hopefully people will know. They're like, there's something about Riven. Why are we spending so much time with him? That's why I don't really go into Kasaius too much because I don't want people to think he is a contender, but I do want to cement him as someone that betrays her at like a fundamental level that she thought she was getting this freedom through him.
Gotcha.
I hope all that made sense.
It definitely does. I want to jump in and just say it's really fascinating that it keeps getting proven again and again. And it's the mission behind why we all came together and started One Brilliant Arc. Story is, it is about humanity, and it's also a weapon for truth. The pen is sharper than the sword. So in all of these political turmoil conversations, the things that are going to create unity and healing for all of us as humanity, instead of just like, I'm one side, you're another, and we don't talk, is going to be stories, because story is the one thing that everyone can relate to and see their humanity in it through the different experiences of others that maybe they don't relate to, but because they relate to one part of this perspective, they can put themselves in someone else's shoes. So that's why storytellers are so important to our world. That's why it's so important to have a theme and to have a reason why you are telling your story. And it should never be, your voice should never be co-opted by the industry or tropes or someone else telling you what you should say or what you should sound like, because that's exactly where you lose the power of your story to tell your message. So yeah, it makes me excited that you are a storyteller who has such a strong purpose and is going down this road of, I'm going to figure out how to tell a story well that opens up this conversation of humanity that we all need to have. Good job.
Yay! Go pass free.
Charles, any final words?
I think honestly, everyone has actually summarized it, but I think it needs a lot of work in terms of the cutting of it, as already mentioned. But I do think the energy for something even better is definitely here.
I thank you for sharing this with us. I say this all the time that I understand how hard it is sometimes to take something that you created. Every story you tell is a part of your soul. And every time you share it with somebody to give you feedback, even if you're a seasoned pro who's got an editor who bullies you like mine does,
I will take responsibility.
even if you have that, it's still always a little bit hard to give a piece of your soul to someone and have them sort of, rip it apart a little bit or even just see it vulnerable. See it in a way that you only intended for you to ever see it. And just share that with somebody takes a lot of bravery. So we salute you for doing that. And the concept of what you've done, I said it from the beginning. I hate fae stories. I hate it. So I hate them so much. But this reading experience, I very, very much enjoyed, and I would read it in its entirety without question. So that says a lot. If you can make the guy who hates the thing like it, you've done something good. So let people know how to find you and where they can get your actual debut novel that came out before.
So I branded myself very well. Everything is author Bria Rose. So author AUTHOR, Bria BRIA ROSE. So author Bria Rose is TikTok, Instagram, my website. It's my Gmail if you need to contact me. Opportunities, I'll take more opportunities. I'll take all of it. But you can find my book on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Walmart.com. And I actually have an audiobook of Her Dark Promise on my website. It is going to be on all the apps, but you can only get a bonus chapter scene and a free ebook if you purchase it through my website. And here is what it looks like.
Ooh.
Here's that. And then here's actually the special edition copy that I had done with probably smut.
That is
Wow.
beautiful.
Blind date with a book. So pretty in the back.
It's very nice.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Yep.
So yeah, that's where you can find me.
Awesome. Well, folks, thank you for listening. Thank you for joining us, Bria. And thank you for welcoming us back, listeners, for a second season. It was a lot longer than it normally is, but that's just kind of how it goes sometimes. It just bees like that.
Have a good story to dig into. We're going to go all the way in.
For sure. For sure. So, yes, please know that if you have a story of your own that you want to have us read and rip it to shreds, with love, of course, you can definitely find us, find the link to our form in the show notes, as well as go to www.ovaconnect.com, find us, and see if we can schedule your appearance. Other than that, thank you so much, Bria, again for joining us. This has been Let's Fix Stories. I am one third of your host, Jared.
I'm a second third. I'm Jaylon.
And I'm Charles.
Later, guys.